Hello and welcome to HMG News. I am Freeman Singh on the late Zimbabwean President Mugabe. We will be speaking specifically on a few topics we will be talking about today, but we are going to be discussing about his rise to power, his fall to power, his complicated relations with the West, as well as his contribution to Zimbabwe as a country, but as also to the African countries in general. And with me today, I have some great men that you guys are very aware of, who have been around for quite some time. We have today BISMARK DONKOR, who's in Ghana, and he represents the economic freedom fighters. He's a part of the economic freedom fighters, for the lack of a better word. But we also have Claude Gatebuke, who's the executive director for the African Great Lakes Action Network. Gentlemen, I want to give you guys a welcome so that the rest of the people can see you, and give him a big welcome.
Thank you.
So we can get started.
Thank you for inviting us. Looking forward to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are looking forward to learning a lot of things.
BISMARK, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, say hello to our viewers and our listeners, please.
All right. Good evening here from Ghana. I bring you warm greetings. I'm very happy to be part of this show, and we look forward to learning a lot of things from one another.
There we go. Mr. Claude Gatebuke, where are you located?
Currently, I am in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, welcome. So today we, as you guys are aware of, we have been seeing and witnessing the funeral for the late President Mugabe in Zimbabwe. Any thoughts, guys, before we get started to our conversation? Have you guys followed, just so that I make sure that I'm not putting you on spot?
Yes, I've followed. I've been following what's going on in Zimbabwe. The funeral. First and foremost, my heart goes out and my condolences to the family, and also to the Zimbabwean people who, at least those who support him, and to the African people. Just, my heart goes out to them, and I've been following both, the kind of the controversy between the family, how the family wants to lay him to rest versus what the state wants to do.
Now, do you guys know whether these discussions are complete and everyone knows where the president is going to be buried, or are we still going under these discussions as we speak? I have heard of rumors. That's why I'm asking you guys. Any words with that, Claude?
The last time I checked, there was just the family was insisting on burying him in his home village, and the state wanted to bury him in an official place where his first wife is actually buried. That's the last I have. I don't have the very latest to the minute, but that's where it was the last time I checked.
BISMARK, what do you hear? What's going on over there in Ghana? How have you guys been going through or following what's happening in Zimbabwe today? Could you give us a bit of a summary or a little bit of how is Ghanaians? How are the Ghanaians seeing or viewing the passing of this late President Mugabe?
All right, thank you very much. First of all, my condolences to the family of former President Mugabe, and then the Zimbabweans and Africans as a whole. Actually, the news of the death of President Mugabe came as a surprise to everyone, even though as a leader, we all knew him to be very strong. And the last we heard of him was that he was at the hospital in Singapore. So when his death, because President Mugabe to some extent wasn't only a Zimbabwean, he was a Ghanaian as well, because he lived here. So when you come to Ghana here, people refer to him as our in-law, our brother-in-law.
Oh,
so
wow.
actually has been going on in Zimbabwe. Yesterday, I watched in a local television. It was said that the government have resolved to bury him at the Heroes Park. That is where they bury their freedom fighters. And yesterday, the president's a letter from the presidency or a press release from the presidency indicated that the president has sent some delegation, including the former president of Ghanaians, and then one with the Zimbabweans. So currently, this is what is going on in Ghana here.
I have seen the former president, Mr. Rawlings. He was at the at the ceremony today. How come the president of Ghana didn't show up? Could you give us a sense of as to what happened? And I know you may or may not know exactly what happened, but any sense as to why the Ghanaian president himself didn't get to attend?
Well, I actually, honestly, I have no clue as to why he couldn't show up. He couldn't show up, but I'm sure he couldn't show up. So he just decided to delegate his powers to the former president to lead a team of delegation to Zimbabwe. But as it stands now, I don't actually, or I can't tell why the president couldn't make it to the funeral of the late Robert Mugabe.
Oh, nevertheless, I think it was equally fantastic to see the former president Rawlings being there and how he has majestically represented the country of Ghana. So, Claude, as we jump into our conversation, I started by saying that we wanted to get a sense or just summarize as African sons. Let me just put a disclaimer out there that we are not politicians. For those of you guys who are watching us, this conversation we're having it as sons of Africa, sons of Africa from different countries. So our viewers are in no way representing any political party. We are just today having a conversation of this late icon, African icon, I should say, President Mugabe. So Claude, with you back there, how have you heard of the rise of Mugabe?
Mugabe is, for a long time, was treated as one of Africa's heroes, one of Africa's proud sons, and there's still a lot of Africans who are definitely heartbroken by the fact that President Mugabe has passed, and we, as far as his rise to power, I think that it's important to mention that he came to power. He came to power through a liberation war against colonialism, which was important, and colonialism was really strong. He was fighting against Cecil Rhodes. He served 10 years in prison. He sacrificed a lot for Zimbabwe and for the people of that country in Southern Africa, which was going through some major turmoil at the time. He was Rhodesia, South. The Southern Rhodesia is what he was fighting for the liberation of, and he came in as a hero, an African hero, a very proud. Someone that made us really proud on the continent of Africa, made a lot of sacrifices, and then through the Lancaster Agreement, was able to secure, along with many other freedom fighters, to secure freedom to end colonialism in Zimbabwe. That's the, to your question on what was his rise to power. That's pretty much, kind of the summary of it.
I see that Mr. Abraham MUTAI, all the way from Kenya, has also joined us. Abraham, welcome. We have lost you, and sorry that we have started a little bit late. Would you give greetings to our viewers all over the world?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you guys having me on board. I hope that my sound is actually doing well over there, and of course my video link is doing okay. Thank you so much for having me, and greetings to all viewers around the world, Zimbabwe, and across Africa.
That's fantastic, Mr. MUTAI. So we were just discussing of the passing of late President Mugabe in Zimbabwe, and I started saying that we will be talking about his rise to power, his fall to power, his complicated relations with the West, as well as his contribution to the country of Zimbabwe and the Africans in general. Any thoughts as far as how do you see this man all the way from Kenya? How has the Kenyan audience taken the message of his passing? Could you give us a little brief on how you guys has taken his his passing?
Thank you so much. Actually, in Kenya, I can say that we have taken it in a mixed feeling, because Kenyans have been very close to Zimbabweans, especially since the elections of 2017. Kenyans have been they have a lot of mixed reactions when it comes to Robert Mugabe himself. Robert Mugabe is quite so well pronounced in Kenya because, just like the rest of Africans, Mugabe had these impacts across Africa that the rest of Africans actually cannot just ignore. Of course, we have the good impact and we have the negative impact, but by the end of the day, the passing of Robert Mugabe was felt strongly in Kenya. Even our president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, declared on Friday and Monday that the flags across the country were to be they were flying, a half-mast, in terms of giving respect to Mugabe. But a sizable number of Kenyans were also feeling that they were feeling the cloud that was raining above the legacy of Mugabe was, it was, speaking loudly, especially towards the end of his reign in Zimbabwe. So there are those people in Kenya who feel that Robert Mugabe did well for Africa and, of course, for the people of Zimbabwe. But there are also Kenyans who feel that in the end, despite that Robert Mugabe did well for Africa and, of course, for the rest of the citizens in Zimbabwe, they feel that in the end, actually, he messed up, and we don't just need to ignore the fact that he messed up. And we actually had the debate in Kenya. We had social media, digital media, even on mainstream media. We had a real debate for 3 days. For 3 days about Robert Mugabe. So I don't know about other countries in Africa, but I can say on behalf of Kenyans that we really had a lot of discussion. We had a public discussion about the passing on of Robert Mugabe, of course, his legacy and how he performed as president until he was removed from power. So I can say that his passing on was pronounced. It was well pronounced in Kenya. Even our president was actually attended the burial today. So I can say that's quite what has happened in Kenya so far, so good.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Mr. MUTAI, for that testimony there. BISMARK, You just heard Claude talking about his quick summary as to how President Mugabe rose to power. Most of us and some of those around the world who do not know, he had been in Ghana for quite some times, and they actually say that his philosophy, as far as whom he became after he became a political or a giant politically, is very much attributed to Ghana and the folks or the people that he's met in Ghana. What do you have to say about that, BISMARK?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, actually, we know that Robert Mugabe in the 1960s, he came to Ghana because I think about 4 years after Ghana being independent, he came here. He heard of the newly independent state of Ghana. So he came here to understudy how the leaders or the freedom fighters in Ghana fought for the liberation of the Ghanaian people. And I must say that his political activism was influenced by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, whom he saw as his mentor and then role model. Yeah, and so, well, living in Ghana, he taught for some time. He understudied our ways of governance, and that was where he met his wife. He married and then went back to Zimbabwe. That was where the real struggle began. Unfortunately, in the year 1964, he was imprisoned for launching revolutionary attack against Ian Smith's government. No, the privilege. In fact, the white minority were having so much privileges than the black minority. So he said, no, I have to fight for my people. He had to be thrown into prison in 1964. So he had to spend the rest of his 11 years imprisonment, actually. Yeah. And with a fight, he wasn't perturbed about what went on in his life. He wasn't perturbed for the fact that he had been in jail for 11 years for fighting for the total liberation of the people of Zimbabwe. And yes, I must say that he really fought very, very hard. He really fought very, very hard. And we must say that when we talk about some of the great freedom fighters in Africa, the name of Robert Mugabe can never, ever, ever be left out. He really, really fought a good fight, even though as human.
I think I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing BISMARK. Are you still there, BISMARK?
I'm on the line.
Okay. Claude Gatebuke, you were just telling us a little more about, do you mind just repeating briefly so that Mr. MUTAI could also gauge your thoughts as far as what you were sharing with us? That way we can be able to have an input from the Kenyan side as well.
Yes, I was saying that I think of Robert Mugabe in terms of his rise to power as someone who sacrificed a lot personally, spending 10 years in prison, fighting against colonialism, obviously putting his own life in danger, and all of that so that Zimbabwe can be free of colonialism, and Southern Africa was one of the most difficult parts of Africa, just almost all of it, between apartheid South Africa and apartheid in Namibia and what was going on in Mozambique and Angola. I mean, Zimbabwe was sandwiched in an area that was not friendly for liberation struggle. And nonetheless, he did that. He led a good liberation struggle, and it was successful, and it was a proud moment for all Africans, and definitely for Zimbabweans. So that is to his rise to power. I do want to add, it's interesting. We've got Abraham from Kenya, and he's president. President Uhuru Kenyatta went to the burial. We've got BISMARK DONKOR from Ghana, and his former president went to the burial. And we have I'm Rwandan, and President Kagame didn't show up. I haven't even seen any kind of condolences coming from Kagame to the family, or any delegation from Rwanda. Not saying that there isn't, I just haven't seen anything. But of course, that goes to part of what happened during Mugabe's rule. And as a great Pan-African, I think there's some contradictions with some of who we think are the new Pan-Africanists, seeing that the Rwandan president didn't even bother to show up for the burial. But maybe we can talk about that later in the show, how that came about.
Yeah, so I was a little bit of surprised myself, especially that President Kagame, he's very widely known, and he's chaired the African Union. He's forged so many relationships with so many countries all over the world, including Zimbabwe at some point. So yeah, I have no idea as to why he hasn't showed up. Oh, by the way, just as a disclaimer, I am also from Rwanda. So when I say that I have not seen President Kagame, I would simply agreeing with Claude in saying that he hasn't seen President Kagame going there at the ceremony. Mr. MUTAI, I don't know if you have followed the speech from President Uhuru Kenyatta earlier on today during the state reception or the state funeral. What are your thoughts as far as what President Uhuru communicated to the people who were there?
First of all, I want to say that I haven't been able to actually follow the speech of the president, because at that very particular time I was engaged in another event. But I've been able to follow the events following the passing on of Comrade Robert Mugabe. In Kenya, I want to say that most, I can say almost 90% of the civil society do not necessarily agree with the stand of the government led by Uhuru Kenyatta in terms of recognizing Robert Mugabe as an African hero. Definitely, there are so many mixed reactions as far as recognizing Robert Mugabe as an African hero goes. I'm saying this because in Kenya we have a very serious debate as to whether we christen Robert Mugabe as an African hero, or we just say yes, he's an African hero, but also discuss some of the things that went wrong. So in Kenya, I want to speak from the Kenyan perspective, and some of the discussions that we've been having is that yes, Robert Mugabe was a great man, and he did a lot for Africa, and he did a lot for his country. At some point, Zimbabwe was doing so well. Even the Zimbabwean currency was quite so strong, and in fact, it was stronger than the rest of the currencies in Africa. And things went by, and things changed, and they really, really changed. And sometimes in Africa, in Kenya, we have this debate, and I'm sorry to say that I fall on the other side. That says that for me, we have to speak both sides. It doesn't matter if someone has departed and is no longer with us. We need to speak both sides. If he did well, we need to say that he did well for us. If he did bad for the, on behalf of the people of Africa, we also need to say that. This is what is really ailing Africa. And from my own perspective, I would say that in Africa, we've had heroes. We have people who stood with us. We have people like Robert Mugabe himself. They did so well by the African spirit. In fact, I'm a Pan-Africanist. I believe that in my book that I will write very soon, Robert Mugabe will take a whole chapter, because he did so well. He stood by the people of Africa. And I can say that, the Africans, one of the biggest problems in Africa is the land question. Because as far as as far as we settle the issue of land question in Zimbabwe, we have an issue of the land question in South Africa. We are seeing that the issue about expropriation without compensation and all that. We also have the land issue in Kenya. We have a problem of the land issue in Kenya, and all these issues are actually cutting across Africa, and they started back then during the colonial period. So this is what I want to say. We have those people who led us and actually fought for the freedom that we have, including Robert Mugabe himself. But the problem that we have as Africans, these very same people that we trusted and we believed to be our own heroes, at some point they turned against us as Africans. I'm saying this because if we compare across the world the heroes and the people who fought for freedom and emancipation of people across India, look at Japan, look at China, look at even the United Kingdom, look at even America. The people who fought for the freedoms, for the freedoms of those countries, the people who fought for the governments, the people who fought for those countries to be what they are at the moment, they laid a very strong foundation for those countries to be what they are. Look at India, for instance. Look at Japan, for instance. If you go back on the issue of Japan, you realize that the people who fought for the independence, actually who fought for what we call the nation of Japan at the moment, these people, they laid a very strong foundation for what it is at the moment, for what Japan is at the moment. Now the problem comes to Africa. In Africa, the people who fought for the freedoms and they fought for the initial, I can call it the first nation of Africa, the first governments of Africa, across Africa, of course, those people, not only they did not come to power, they came to power and they plundered the nations across Africa. I can tell you about Kenya, I can speak about Tanzania, I can speak about Rwanda, I can speak about Uganda, and I can even speak about Zimbabwe. These people, they are supposed to lay strong foundations for strong nations. They are supposed to lay foundations to ensure that the African nation is rising. But unfortunately, the same people that we want to call heroes at the moment, they also played a negative part that has made the African nation as a general what it is at the moment. At the moment, look at the turmoil in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is not stable. Look at the currency of Zimbabwe. Look at the economy of Zimbabwe. Things are so worse at the moment. In fact, they are so worse that we don't even need to speak about Zimbabwe. What happened somewhere? So for me, I come from the school of thought whereby for us to emancipate ourselves as Africans, it is very important that we start telling our leaders and our people that want to, the people who fight for anything in Africa, be it leaders, politicians, be it, activists, they need to ensure that the African nation, that they need to ensure that they have put the African nation on the right path. We should be talking a situation whereby we have a very strong economy of Zimbabwe because the president of Zimbabwe put the Zimbabwe on a very strong path economically. But now we are talking of a situation, a scenario whereby we had a hero, a person who stood by the Africans, and then he wrestled power from the Europeans. Unfortunately, at some point, he turned against his own people. So in Kenya, this is the kind of discussion that we are having at the moment. And I can assure you that the president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, who is in Zimbabwe today, is representing the rest of us as Kenyans. But I can give you what most Kenyans are feeling. Most Kenyans are feeling that at some point, yes, we want to recognize that Robert Mugabe did well for Africa and for Zimbabwe. But at the same time, most Kenyans feel that it is very important we also speak out and say he also did bad. He impacted negatively at the people of Zimbabwe and the rest of Africans. He did well on the land system. We recognize that. Also, it did so badly as far as the economy goes. It did so badly as far as the dollar goes. So many people were killed in Zimbabwe, and they were killed under his watch. So these are the questions that we are dealing with in Kenya by saying, do we actually say he's a hero? Is a hero? A hero is someone who stands by his own people and does well by the people and put the economy on the right path, or a hero is someone who wrestles power from the Europeans and then goes ahead to turn against his own people. So these are some of the questions that we are dealing with as Kenyans.
Mr. Donkor, in Ghana, Ghana is regarded as one of the mature country politically, and the fact that Mr. Mugabe has had so much teaching and learning from Ghana. What do you have to say of what MUTAI has just spoke of, especially when it comes to the economic dire situation that is, that the Zimbabweans are going through, even politically? Do you believe, or do you feel like, to a certain extent, Ghana can take some credit, both good and bad, as to how Mugabe turned out in Zimbabwe?
Please, I didn't get the latter part of your question. There was a network trouble somewhere.
Yes, I was asking. I made a statement saying that Ghana is regarded as one of the mature African country politically, and the fact that you have given Mr. Mugabe trainings in various ways and philosophy, if I may dare add to that. Do you feel, as a son of Ghana, that Ghana as a country can take some credit, both good and bad, as to what Zimbabwe as a country has become, but also as to the leadership of President Mugabe? And also, would you speak your personal opinion as far as what do you feel of him being a hero, and also giving a little contrast as to what he left the Zimbabwe as a country, the situation of Zimbabwe as a country right now, after he just, when he gave up power, or rather when he was toppled off power. What do you have to say as a son of Ghana in relation to that?
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, actually, before President Mugabe came into power, he had a very good vision for his country, because no leader comes into power to destroy his people. Now, he had a very good intention to develop his family, to develop Zimbabwe as a country, to develop the lives of the people of Zimbabwe. Unfortunately, there were certain decisions that he took which brought hardship, for which his people weren't prepared. Yeah, actually, as we said, he started as a liberator. He started as a hero. Unfortunately, he ended up bringing down whatever he had built all these years himself. Now, when he came into power, to ensure equity and then equality, he decided to take land from the white men or the white farmers and then redistribute them to the majority blacks. Unfortunately, that agenda backfired. Later, it was realized that his supporters, the supporters of his militia group and some government officials, were rather claiming land for themselves. So the idea of taking land from the whites and giving them back to the majority blacks didn't actually help in a way. Now, to add salt to injury, Zimbabwe also experienced a very serious, sanction from USA and then the UK, thereby crippling the economy of Zimbabwe. Now, after taking the land from the white farmers, it was realized that the productivity in Zimbabwe went drastically low. Goods and services actually didn't took a very serious nosedive. The production of goods and services took a very serious nosedive. There were a lot of hardships in the country. Now, in all this, I think that his appointees, those who were around him, were either too afraid to prompt him that, my leader, this is the path you are taking, which is no good. So you have to take the right course. Or they were threatened. That if you make any more mistake or if you actually criticize my government, I can take your position away from you. So those around him also didn't help. In my perspective, they didn't help. They could have at least helped him to formulate certain policies that would eventually bring something good for his people and then the country as a whole.
So do you feel that his land distribution policies are what brought down the country, the whole entire Zimbabwe, down economically, or is just one of many things, maybe, should we say, failures, or perhaps mismanagement of a country? What do you think of that on your end there?
Well, it's one out of a lot. One out of a lot. One of the mistakes he actually made. He didn't take his time to embark on that land redistribution policy. He should have at least taken his time to do so. And then for the fact that he decided to cling onto power. Meanwhile, there were other people who also wanted to serve the nation, who also wanted to serve the people, but he decided to cling onto power for a very long time, denying the rest of those who had the zeal and then the passion to govern Zimbabwe. And so I think this and many other things contributed to the downfall of Zimbabwe as an economic country and in terms of development.
Claude, when you see the President Mugabe, I know that from a little bit of a background when you and I spoke, you have a mixed feelings, a mixed opinion as to both his successes and his failures. Do you believe that his land distribution is a result of the economic downfall of Zimbabwe, especially that most of us have known that Zimbabwe used to be a powerhouse economically for not just Zimbabwe, but also African?
Yeah, Zimbabwe was known as the breadbasket of Africa, one of the most advanced economies on the continent. Of course, I think it has the highest rates of education on the continent, I believe. And now also, not long ago, I was looking at some of the top schools on the continent, and the Zimbabwean schools did really well. I think it was the country that led the rest of the country. I mean, the rest of the continent in terms of education. The land distribution issue for me is a little bit complicated. As you said, my view of Mugabe is mixed feelings. So I spoke about his rise to power, which I thought was heroic, getting rid of colonialism. Then he goes on for a 20-year period where, from 1980 to 2000, where Zimbabwe was thriving. But after those 20 years, Zimbabwean people were tired of Mugabe, and they wanted change. During this period, also, and I've known a lot of Zimbabweans, they basically said, you know what, in the early 2000s, they said he did well, but he's been there too long. People just want change. We just want change. One of my favorite songs is from a popular Zimbabwean singer who passed away months ago, Oliver Mtukudzi, that says, Vuma wasakara, admit it, you're old. This feeling, he did stay too long. The land distribution issue, though, it was part of the agreement with the British at independence that they would either pay for the lands during that 20-year period to 2000 or return the land to native Zimbabweans. So I agreed with Mugabe taking back the land and redistributing it to the Zimbabweans, the native Zimbabweans, because that was not only the agreement, but they had lost the land from just being taken from colonialism. They should have never lost their land to begin with. So I agreed with him on that. The way he did it, it was corrupt. It was mostly given to his cronies. It was given to people who were close to him, not necessarily redistributed to the masses. there could have been a better process in terms of getting it done. He also used it as a political, how can I call it? He was trying to get political mileage out of it in order to cling on to power and win elections, and sometimes rig and sometimes he rigged the elections to stay in power. And so I do think that it was the trigger to the economy in Zimbabwe going down because of how the West turned against Mugabe. Mugabe was one of the favorites of the West during the 20-year period. Then in 2000, he turns and starts taking the land from the whites, and the West turns on him. The US puts sanctions on him. The British put sanctions on him, and everything goes south. I remember during that period, which kind of brings me back to why Kagame is not at the funeral. Part of it is because President Kagame, as much as he claims to be a Pan-Africanist, he is a puppet of Western powers, and he serves the interest of his biggest donors, who happen to be the British and the Americans, and those are sworn enemies of Mugabe. And as you've seen, obviously, they're also absent from the burial. Now, during that period in the 2000s, one of the things why I have mixed reviews and mixed views of Mugabe, I don't agree with assaulting people or using violence to achieve ends. They were assaulting white people in Zimbabwe. I do remember there was a day during that period when Jonas Savimbi in Angola used a train and killed, the toll was about 300 people. There was no report on that, or there was very minimal reporting on that. And there was assault on the white people, and all the spotlight was on the beatings of the white farmers in South Africa. I disagree with beating the white farmers, but you could see that that was the biggest turning point when the West turned on Mugabe. Obviously, during that period, I also think Mugabe he came in as a hero again for Africans when Rwanda and Uganda invaded the Congo and were exterminating Congolese people to the extent where the UN mapping report reported that troops from Rwanda may have committed genocide in the Congo. Basically, there are signs of genocide in the Congo, except it just hasn't gone to court. Mugabe came on the side of the Congolese people, and the Zimbabwean, the Angolans, and the Namibians fought against the takeover of the Congo, which is what the Congolese people wanted, the integrity of their territory. They still do today. And so at that point, he was at the same time a villain for the Zimbabweans who wanted change, and a hero for the Congolese who saw their lives, many of their lives, saved from that invasion. And since that time, obviously, again, you know, the new kids on the block, the guys that Bill Clinton called the new the visionary leaders of Africa, you know, Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni were on one side of the fight. Mugabe was on the other side of the fight. And that kind of brings us back in the moment today, why, you know, Kagame isn't there. And I'm from what I've seen, Museveni is not there either. And I'm not sure that he sent a delegation, but obviously Museveni doesn't pretend to be a great Pan-Africanist or anything like that. But to answer your question about the economy taking a tumble and falling, it started with the West being angry about Mugabe enforcing an agreement from independence that obviously was wrongly and badly implemented. But their issue was not even the implementation. Their issue was the simple fact that he was taking the land back and giving it to Africans, and he obviously, you know, bashed that also. So that's my mixed reviews and views of Mugabe, and to answer your question on the land issue.
So it seems like Claude, you just mentioned that. So I took the war, the beating of these white farmers and land grabbing, and also the massacre. Speaking of which, I know that yesterday especially, there were so many reports that I was reading and I watched of people claiming that the massacre of allegedly 20,000 lives have also tainted his presidency and his leadership, and also have been or could be a part of the reason why economically that the country is what it is today. Is that something that you fellows right now that we are having a conversation with agree? I will go with Mr. Mutai.
If I can jump in real quick, that was one of the other reasons why I think his record is mixed. The massacre of the Ndebele, the 20,000 Ndebele people in Matabele land, I believe it's called the Gukurahundi massacre. That's one
right.
of the biggest red mark on Mugabe, which almost disqualifies him as he's a hero of independence, but at the same time, you know, anybody that massacres massive numbers of Africans cannot necessarily be known as a hero. And so that's one of the reasons why, for me, I have mixed feelings about
But it is my understanding that the massacre of these 20,000 innocent lives took place earlier in between 1982 and 83. I'm not entirely sure when it took place, but from there on, there is 30 plus years to my calculation. I may not be good in math, but there's a stretch of 30 years uncounted for. How in the world do you explain that could also be the contribution or a result of the economy in Zimbabwe going down? I mean, seriously, let's be real for that. What do you guys think? Mr. DONKOR, what do you think, Bismail?
Interestingly, well, I don't know. I don't actually know for a fact the reason behind the massacre. And well, in a way, it could have also contributed to the decline of the Zimbabwean economy, because as you massacre, the West, who are waiting to see your weakness and then attack you, will also take advantage of what whatever action you take against your people. And killing over 20,000 people is a very, very unfortunate incident. It's a very serious issue. The last time I was having a chat with a Zimbabwean friend, and I asked whether those people were not militant. He said no, they were just ordinary men and women and then children who had no intention to harm. According to him, some of them were critical of Mugabe's government. And if you are a critic of Mugabe's government, you are seen as the enemy of the state. So actually, yes, to some larger extent, the killing of the 20,000 innocent men and women and then children, that is the alleged killing, could have also contributed to the downfall of the economy.
Okay, I guess definitely I would agree that is a part of why the economy is bad. So again, I personally, I'm not entirely convinced that all these decades that the Zimbabweans as a collective, not just the president, because I imagine there are millions and millions of Zimbabweans. And if I was a Zimbabwean, and again, I don't want to play devil's advocate here, I'm having such a tremendous trouble just looking at the timeline from the 80s all the way to right now. I mean, 2017 when he left the power. The economy. President Mugabe could not possibly have been the only one pushing for the economy of the country. I imagine that the Zimbabweans would have been a part of that. Now, given the fact that these innocent lives were killed, and given the fact that the land was taken from white farmers, and meddling in other countries' wars, as Cloud has alluded for, what then could possibly have been the reason as to why Zimbabwe is what it is today? Could the West, could Europeans have a part in it, or is it something that the Zimbabweans should own up as a people and not necessarily pass on the buck to the president just because he's dead? And I understand, as the father of a country, he has the buck stops with him. But now, as a people, what is our role as far as how to ensure that our own economy is pushed forward? In this instance, from the 80s all the way to today, I'm sure there have been times where the economy was great, but now it's down. How do we account and how do we explain why the economy it is what it is right now? And I hope that we should also wrap up quickly with that so we can be able to move on to another topic. But I'd like to hear of you of your understanding or of your opinion with that, BISMARK.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, as I stated, the reasons for which the economy of Zimbabwe has taken a very serious nosedive is diverse. Yes, it will be from the Western countries, the refusal of the Western countries to come to the aid of Zimbabwe, because already Mugabe was seen as a threat to the West. He wasn't actually giving them the chance to do whatever they wish with Zimbabwe. He didn't subject himself to puppetry. He was he was working for us against the Western countries. And yes, if you think you are independent, then you should be able to provide your own needs. So yes, to some extent, the fact that the Western countries refused to assist Zimbabwe or refused to come to the aid of Zimbabwe when they realized that the economy was in shambles could have also accounted for the current economic state of Zimbabwe right now.
So why should the West come to the aid of Zimbabwe? Especially, so I gather that if I claim to be independent, then I ought to provide for myself, correct? Exactly. I think that's the premise. So if Zimbabwe as a country was independent, and at the same time, the economy was toppling down, how do we explain, or would the United States, would the Europeans, the UK, France, or whoever, whatever country that have been helping them, or the UK, could they been, or could it have been their own burden to come back to Zimbabwe and say, hey, we see that things aren't working out right, let's go right ahead and help you guys out? Or the Zimbabweans themselves should have been the ones to get right down and get on with it and actually do what it is that they had to do and push the economy right back up? What do you have to say about that, Mr. MUTAI?
Thank you so much. I don't have mixed feelings as far as the whole issue of Zimbabwe and Robert Mugabe is concerned. You've talked about the economy, what the people should have done, and what the leadership should have done. I think it's time that we become very honest with ourselves as far as Africans are concerned. Our main problem is we are not honest, and I think in our conversation we are really trying to be politically correct. I feel something like we are trying to be, like politically correct. So we don't want to call out Robert Mugabe for who actually he was. He was a failure. We just need to be honest with ourselves, because I want to speak to Cloud. Cloud is in the United States at the moment, and he would actually attest to this. Since the United States got independence way back up to today, they have been changing presidents after another for almost, they now have almost 200 years. And for them, it has been about if a leader is incompetent, if a political party is incompetent, it is removed from power and another one is replaced, for that matter. So over time, it has become about, it is now about issues. It is about who is going to fix the economy better than any other person that is running for presidency of the United States. And I think Cloud Kachabuke will actually attest to that. This is what we need in Africa. The reason why I'm saying this is because we don't want to, we don't want to sit here and try to excuse Robert Mugabe as a hero. We are not excusing him as a hero. I want us to be brutally honest with ourselves. If Robert Mugabe was in a country like, for instance, United States, or even in London, that is the United Kingdom, or any other country in Europe at the moment, trust you me, he could be in jail as we speak right now, or he could have died in jail. Because these countries have invested a lot in their criminal justice system. But in Africa, we have not invested in the criminal justice system. That's why we have leaders who are heroes that done so good for us as Africans, but they turn against us, they eat the people of Africa, they turn the economy upside down, but still when they die, we want to celebrate them as heroes. We just want to forget that they could have done better with the chance they had as leaders. You see? So, you see, a country like South Korea, let me give an example of South Korea. South Korea removed their president and they jailed her for corruption. But in Africa, we just want to excuse someone who presided over the killing of his own citizens, 20,000 citizens. We want to find some sort of excuse. We want to, go somewhere around it and say he's a hero, and forget the fact that while he was in power, 20,000 citizens of his own country were killed. I mean, for me, it's not excusable. That's not a hero. We don't need to speak about that person as a hero. The word hero should not even appear anywhere near that person. You are not a hero until you set your republic along a path of prosperity. This is what has happened in India. It is what has happened in South Korea. It is what has happened even in Singapore. It is what is happening in the United States. It is happening in Europe. All the countries in Europe, France, name them. Talk about Germany. Talk about Brussels. These countries have set themselves along the path of prosperity because the leaders who took power did not overstay in power. Number two, they decided to put their countries on the road of prosperity. I want to say this. As Africans and as citizens of Africa, we have some part that we have contributed to this situation. Number one, we don't question our leaders. We don't put them. We don't ask for accountability from them. That has made them, to walk around and operate in impunity. That is our failure as the people of Africa. Very rarely do people of Africa stand together and ask for, accountability. It is very rare. We always talk about that leader comes from my community, therefore I don't need to question him. He's my community. That's our problem. So as a citizenry, we have contributed. Now, when it comes to political leadership, when I say, if we talk about political leadership and we talk about the citizens, I can give the blame in Africa, I can give about 70% to the political leadership. And this is the reason why I do that. When you've been elected as a leader, it is your responsibility to actually set that nation or those people who have elected you in the path of prosperity. It is your responsibility. There is no A or a B about it. It's only one way about it. Set those people on the line or a path of prosperity. Ensure you work by the people. Ensure you do right by the people. You don't have room of killing 20,000 people and then come back and tell us, you guys see, I fought for, I was in the freedom fight. I'm a hero. Yet you've killed 10,000 of us. I mean, come on. As Africans, we need to wake up. Let's talk about Cameroon, for instance. There's a crisis in Cameroon. You see, the Amazonians are being killed every day. The government of Paul Biya is actually conducting a silent, a genocide over time. So the situation here is this. African leadership, they need to wake up. And there is no A or B, there is no answers about this. When you are a political leader, you need to take responsibility. Other nations other nations have tried their leaders. They have sentenced them to death. They have sentenced them to life imprisonment. Others are serving jail time as we speak. But for us, we are excusing people who have plundered our nation. They have killed our own people. They have stolen from our own nation and stashed the money in Switzerland. And then we are here trying to excuse them, trying to find a way of branding them heroes, yet they have not worked by the people. What is the role of elections? If we elect people who actually plundered the nation, and then tomorrow we want to call them heroes. So I want to say this because I was in a meeting yesterday of Kenyans who feel so strongly about Mugabe. I don't want to trash what he did for Africa. I want to recognize what he did for Africa and the people of Zimbabwe. But I also want to say, if we want a strong Africa, if we want a strong nation as Africa, if every nation in Africa wants a strong nation, we need to start working on our own systems. We need strong institutions. We need a strong judicial system in Africa. In every nation in Africa, we need a strong judicial system. And if we have a strong judicial system, trust you me, Mugabe would have been tried for political crimes he committed. He could have been tried for all the economic crimes he committed in Zimbabwe. There was a time Zimbabwe, they could not even use their own money. They resorted using money from South Africa and the dollar, the US dollar. I mean, someone should take political responsibility. So when are we waiting? Okay, the question is this. When will someone take a political responsibility? That's the question. So if Africa wants some change, we need to start borrowing from our neighbors. Our neighbors are the United States. Our neighbors is Europe. Our neighbors is China. Even China, a communist state. If you are caught in corruption, you get hanged. I mean, and it's a communist state. It's almost a dictatorship. And that's why they have so many millionaires. The economy is doing so well, they are threatening the United States. Now look at Africa. We are here, seated on an international TV, trying to excuse someone who actually did well, yes, but at some point did not do well by the people of Africa. And then he has passed on without us actually, making injustice. If we had a strong judicial system in Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe could have faced the judicial system for the crimes he committed while in power. Let me leave that one on that. Let me just shortly, before I leave, let me speak about his tenure. When he came to power, and I want to speak this because we have Cloud there, and Cloud is he has studied so well the system in the United States and in Europe, and I know he can attest to this. The leaders of these countries, when they took up power, and actually they tried so much as possible to have a strong constitution for their countries. They worked so hard to have strong institutions, the judicial system. They work so hard to have, the anti-corruption systems in those countries. They work so hard to ensure that when they leave power, they will leave something like a going concern, a country that has strong institutions. But the problem in Africa is that we have leaders like Robert Mugabe himself. We have someone like Paul Biya. We have someone like Nabongo. We have someone like Museveni himself. The problem with these people is that they are in power, they are not working on the institutions. So that when they leave power, they have strong institutions that are going to serve the people after them. And in fact, I've forgotten someone very critical in this discussion, someone called Paul Kagame. They should be working on strong, very strong institutions that are so independent so that when they leave power, there will be stability in those countries. But let me tell you, when these people leave power, there's no stability. Look at when Robert Mugabe was leaving. There was a coup. I mean, there was no stability in Zimbabwe. So, in essence, what I'm trying to say is, Africans, we need to start being honest. We need to start calling hypocrisy for what it is. We need to start calling people for who they are. If they have stolen from us, they have stolen the minerals of Zimbabwe, they have stolen the minerals of South Africa. If they are corrupt, let's call them thieves for who they are. Because in other countries, if you go to London, you cannot operate like Robert Mugabe and still be free. Let's be honest. He was our hero, yes. He liberated us from the colonialists. Yes, thank you. But you cannot liberate us and then go ahead and actually work on us. Forget that we are your own people. We should have jailed him for his own crimes. And all the people who are working around him, we should have done that. We should do this to every other leader in Africa who forgets that he is actually there on behalf of the rest of Africans. And this is where we go wrong as Africans. As Africans, we need to start realizing someone who is in power is not absolutely there. Is there courtesy of us. We are giving him the power to operate on our own behalf. So therefore, if he goes wrong, if he loots the money, plunders the nation, kills some of us, we need to put him through the judicial system so that he can actually get justice through the judicial system. And that's where we fail as Africans. Everywhere. I mean, let's start from South Africa. We go all the way up to Kenya, here in Kenya. Our presidents, they plunder the nations, they steal from us, they go to power to do business, not to empower businessmen and the young businessmen and the young entrepreneurs, but still we want to worship them and call them heroes. That is so unfortunate. It is so unfortunate and unacceptable. And I'm speaking to the rest of Africans who are watching today. And I'm saying this. It is time that we start calling a spade a spade. Yes, you've done well by us. What you're supposed to do, if you do well by us, you're supposed to do well by us until we die. You don't need to do well by us, then tomorrow turn against us, kill us, plunder the nation, steal from us, give property to your own kids, and then you expect the rest of the nation to sit down and pray to you because you are a hero. So for me, I'm saying that it is a wake-up call for the rest of Africa. It's a serious wake-up call, and we must wake up at the moment.
Claude, before we move on, because we're running short of time, what do you have to say of Abraham's comments, Mr. MUTAI's comment?
I think Abraham is correct, and I don't know if maybe that's the impression he got from my remarks, but for me, there is zero excuse for anybody that massacres Africans, and I think I've made that very clear from the beginning. Nobody should get away with massacres of massive numbers of people. And so we're talking about the 20,000 Ndebele people in the Gukurahundi massacre. Absolutely. Mugabe should serve time for that. Any president in Africa that massacres Africans should and must serve time, because if the culture of impunity is an issue for Africans and it's going to keep on going. I think the part where I would add to what Abraham said is not just the leaders. The people have a big responsibility in it. When people, as you said, make excuses and say it's okay for a leader, for my favorite leader to kill, it's okay for my favorite leader to steal, or I'm too scared to talk about it or to deal with it or to address them, so I'm just going to worry about my own little safety, which you're not safe anyway to begin with if you're not speaking out. You're just next in line. The culture of impunity has to end. I agree with that. What the main thing is recognizing that during the fight for liberation against colonialism, for me, I do see Mugabe as a hero for the sacrifices he made during that time. For killing the Ndebele people, the 20,000 Ndebele people he killed, I see him as a villain and he should be held accountable for it. That should go for every single president on the African continent that's doing that. The corruption and the nepotism and everything else that he did, he should also serve time for that. The fighting alongside the Congolese people who were on the brink of, who were being exterminated, you know what? Saving lives, I think, is important. I think he helped save a lot of lives in the Congo. At the same time, the killing already, the killing of the Ndebele people has already disqualified him, and that's why I said, you know, his record is mixed as far as I'm concerned. Staying in power forever, that should never happen, and that's where the people come in. If the people aren't complaining, if the people aren't in the streets marching and making the place, like, you are not going to stay here for a whole lifetime of people, for a whole generation, then the people are also at fault. The president is at fault, the leadership is at fault for, you know, that's obviously a failure. You know, that's what happens when you go to school, right? And you don't pass your class, you repeat the year, and you repeat it and repeat it. That's what I see of every single one of these presidents in Africa that's changing constitutions. And we know a lot of them that have done that. You know, we've seen Kabila try that in the Congo. He failed, and he overstayed for at least 2 years. So that's a failure. He failed his grade. Kagame changed the constitution in 2015. He's a failure because he should have graduated to the next class, and he didn't. Museveni has done that, and he even changed the age limit in Uganda, and a bunch of various presidents have done it. Sassou Nguesso in Congo. Paul Biya has been there for 40 years. Obiang Wema has been there for 40 years. These presidents that overstay is a total sign of failure, because when you succeed, you move on to the next thing. When you succeed, you move on to the next thing. So yes, I agree that for Mugabe to be president for 37 years, that's a total failure on him, on his government, and also on the people of Zimbabwe. Obviously, I can never discount the role of the West when it comes to these things. The West had amnesia when Mugabe killed the 20,000 Ndebeles because he was one of their favorites. Then he started taking the land and he became a villain. And now, 40 years later, oh, it's coming back and it's being talked about as part of the reason why the economy is messed up. It didn't mess up the economy in the 80s, didn't mess up the economy in the 90s. The problem was when he started touching the land that white people had. That's what the issue is. But as far as Abraham, his remarks, I agree. Africans, we need to be honest with ourselves. We cannot make excuses of these leaders that massacre our people, whether it's in the country, the borders that we were born in, within the borders that we were born in, or outside of the borders that we were born in. So if it happens in Cameroon, which it is, we should be concerned and we should be speaking up. Happening in the Congo, we should speak up. It happens in Zimbabwe, we should speak up. Happens in Kenya, South Africa, Rwanda, Uganda, Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan. It's happening in South Sudan, and it's horrible. We have to speak up. And these presidents and these leaders that do these things to our African sisters and brothers cannot get away with it. So I'm 100% in agreement in terms of accountability and not calling somebody saying, oh yeah, this person is a hero. You can't just give a speech and be a hero, which I think a lot of people who think of him as a hero is because of his speeches. You also got to preserve the lives of the people, and you got to lay down the infrastructure for the country to succeed. And as far as that, he didn't do it.
BISMARK, your thoughts on the rise and fall of Zimbabwe president, as well as what Mr. MUTAI has shared with us. What are your thoughts on that? BISMARK,
I think BISMARK is not ready. I think BISMARK is not ready.
Yeah, we Africans, we the leaders, to do what they do sometimes.
BISMARK, are you there or he's offline? Okay, let's move to Mr. MUTAI while BISMARK is still trying to come back.
Thank you, Bikora. Sorry, Bismarck, are you there?
Now.
Okay, just go on.
Bismarck, please go ahead. Oh, he's not okay. I think Bismarck has gone offline.
Okay.
Abraham, please.
Let me say something about about external pressure that African leaders have been facing, because I'll say that we've had a very strong debate, and actually we had a few days ago, around 2 days ago, we had a debate in Nairobi town hall where we met about I think we were around 120 Kenyan activists. We were discussing Zimbabwe and the death of Robert Mugabe. And there were views that the situation in Zimbabwe got worse because the Western media, I mean, not just media, I mean, the Western countries or the Western governments got involved. But I am not of the opinion that the Zimbabweans are suffering because the Western countries got involved. I'm not of that opinion. Because back in 1980s and 1970s, when we had Thomas Sankara coming into power, back then there were not a lot of money. I mean, the economies were not so large, they were not so big as they are today. But all of us who are on this panel today, we understand Thomas Sankara did so well until the West conspired through Compaoré to kill him, to assassinate him. In 4 years, Thomas Sankara did so well. He did so well without the Western aid. And in fact, I remember his speech when he was speaking to African leaders in Addis Ababa. He told them, we don't need the Western aid. We don't need money from the West. We can actually fund our economies. So what I want to say is, I want to borrow from him because he lived during the time when the African economies were so young, and you could not expect a lot of money circulating in the economy. But he did so well. I don't want to enumerate what he did. For those who are watching, you can just try and find out. He did so well. He did so well, more than so many African current leaders at the moment. In fact, he did extremely well. That's Thomas Sankara for you. So what I want to say is that African leaders, the problem with African leaders is not the West. The problem with African leaders, it is themselves. It is themselves because you don't need aid from the West for you to develop Africa. Thomas Sankara did it when there was there was not a lot of funds in Africa. There was not a lot of money circulating in Africa, but he did it so well until he made a speech telling the other African leaders, you don't need to indebt yourself. You don't need to enslave yourself with money from the West in terms of aid. You need to make your economies work for yourself. This is what I'm trying to say. African leaders are not managers. They don't know how to manage the economy. It is all about looting and taking money for themselves. An African economy, especially Zimbabwe. Let's talk about Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was self-sustaining at some point. It was self-sustaining. Claudia said it was the bread basket of Africa. I have been in Zimbabwe, and I was there for 1 month actually. I toured so many places in Zimbabwe. I could not believe it. Even the town of Harare is so much organized than Nairobi. Actually, Harare is well organized than Nairobi. So the point is this. African leaders can do better. It is all about leadership. It is not about money from the West. The West, they control you because they give you aid, they give you money, they give you business. And because you're greedy, you think about the money they're giving you. You don't think about your own people. If you put your own interest aside, put your own companies aside, put the money you're thinking about amassing so much wealth, stashing this wealth in Switzerland, don't think about that. Think about your own people. The way Thomas Sankara did for his own people. Trust you me, the rest of African nations, we could be giving aid to Brazil today. We could be giving aid to the Middle East. That's what we could be doing at the moment. But unfortunately, because African leaders, they are thinking about aid in terms of money. They think in terms of business. Their companies, African leaders, if you walk across Africa, you realize that the most successful companies in Africa are companies owned by politicians. I can tell you today, without blinking, the most successful companies in Kenya, the first 20 successful companies are owned by politicians. In the media, the leading 3 media houses are owned by politicians. The leading 3 insurance companies in Kenya are owned by politicians. The leading transport companies, the 4 of them are owned by politicians. The leading milk company in Kenya is owned by our own president. So this is replicated across Africa. African presidents and African politicians, they think in terms of money. They want to make more money, more money, more money. But the point is, suppose these African leaders decide to think the way Thomas Sankara was thinking, think that they can fund the economy without getting money from London, without getting money from Washington, without getting money from Beijing, China. Suppose we start thinking like that, they can do that. Even myself, I know I can do that. We can think like that. Our own problem is greedy. We are so greedy. Greed is killing Africans. We are thinking in terms of, this is my company and I need money from China. I want to give them this business so that they can give me this money so that I can export to this country. That is our main problem. So we have talked about why Zimbabwe is where it is. Zimbabwe was so good until sanctions came in. Now, when sanctions came in, it found that Robert Mugabe was not a good leader. Because if Robert Mugabe was not a good leader, you don't need to travel to the United States for your own people to eat. It's a fact. It is a fact. We can even trade within Africa. Africa has almost 1 billion plus population. We can trade within ourselves. We can manufacture things in Kenya and export those things to Namibia. Namibia can export their things to Tanzania. Tanzania can export their things to Equatorial Guinea. Why are we so much, like we want to export our product to Europe, China, and the United States, yet we cannot work within ourselves? So what I'm saying here is this. We have bad leadership in Africa. We need to be very honest with ourselves. Let's not lie and beat around the bush. We have incompetent leaders. Europe is giving aid to Africa not because someone gave them more money. It is just because they manage their own little money to an extent that they are now producing more. I have been to Belgium. Belgium, they are one of the largest producers of cocoa products. That is chocolate. But they don't have even one tree. They don't have even one tree. They are bringing all of their raw materials from West Africa. But the largest producer of chocolate is Belgium, and they don't have even one tree. So why don't we just produce this chocolate in West Africa instead of exporting the trees and the products and the cocoa to Europe? It is about bad leadership. And we need to call it out. We need to say it the way it is. I mean, come on, Africans. It is time we call it the way it is. Our leaders are letting us down. And I'm saying this without any contradiction. I'm saying this because I know one thing. I have said that if we have to abortion blame of the situation in Zimbabwe, I could say 90% or 70 to 90%, I would give it to the leaders. Because if you are a good person, you can move the whole nation and move it towards prosperity. That is the work of a leader. You guide people, you provide direction, you give them direction. Zimbabweans have not been given direction. The direction they were given is about looting, plundering the nation, until the economy was on its knees. And when the economy was on its knees, the people who are rejoicing and celebrating are the billionaires.
Thank you, Mr. MUTAI. Thank you so much. I did not want to interrupt you while you were sharing with us. However, I know that The reason why I wanted to wrap up this that particular segment is because a part of what you have just shared with us is what I wanted to talk about next. Now, before we move on to our next conversation, I want to know is Bismarck still with us, and can he hear me? Bismarck, can you hear me?
The mic of Bismarck is actually muted. I think it's muted.
Yeah.
Bismarck.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. So we had just spent a few minutes without hearing from you, but I wanted to wrap up this conversation of rise and fall of Mugabe because I really want to talk about the next conversation as it relates to the complicated relationships with Robert Mugabe and the West. And part of it, Mr. MUTAI was sharing it with us. Could you give us your thoughts, your last minute thoughts as far as what you think of the I think he's gone. Okay.
I think the microphone is a little bit weak. We're having a hard time hearing you from the studio.
So guys, the next
Hello?
Small segment that I'd like to discuss is the relationship.
Hello, I'm on the line.
I can hear you, Bismarck, but I'm not hearing the studio.
You can hear me?
All right. I'm not hearing anything from the studio either.
Hey guys,
just wait
you
until
can hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Oh,
all right.
Okay.
All right.
So I was just saying that at Bismarck, we have missed you just a few minutes ago, and our brother MUTAI in Kenya, he was just wrapping up. And there is another interesting topic that I really wanted to jump right in. But before I do so, I'd like your thoughts on the rise and fall of Mr. Mugabe, but also a quick summary as to what you thought of Mr. MUTAI's, what he has shared with us as far as the economy in Zimbabwe. And then right quick, we can jump right in the next topic. Please share with us.
All right, thank you very much. One problem we have here in Africa is leadership. Incontrovertibly, Africa has all what it takes to develop because we have all the natural resources that you can think of, be it gold, bauxite, cocoa, phosphate, and name them. But unfortunately, the kind of leadership we have on this continent is really not helping us. It's really not helping us. Every government that comes to power tries to loot, tries to create, loot, and then share. So it comes as no surprise when those political elites are the ones always prospering to the detriment of the ordinary citizens. We have all it takes to develop. We have all the resources. Unfortunately, due to bad leadership, we are not able to put all these good resources into use. So talking of Mugabe, yes, at the damn still stage of his political career, we must say he did well, but from the mid to the latter part of his presidency, things didn't really go on well. While ordinary Zimbabweans were languishing in poverty, he and his cronies were looting. Yes, we could all attest to the fact that his wife, in fact, his family, some of his appointees were spending the hard-earned nation's resources abroad for their own personal use. And one thing that I find so interesting about the youth of Africa is that the potential discerning youth of Africa turn blind eye on the faults of the politicians. Some of them even tend to be fingers. They don't see anything wrong with what their leaders are doing, especially the party faithfuls. Whenever a politician is engaged in corruption, they will be the first people to come out and defend that politician, which is no good. We have allowed personal interest to supersede national interest. What we think about is ourselves. So when it's election times and then politicians come around to campaign, what we know is that we take few amount of money, then we vote them back into power. So in a way, I think we the youth, we are also the cause of the downfall of this continent, because we think that voting people that we know, voting people who do us personal favors into power are the people who have the potential to develop the nation, which is wrong. We always need to be independent minded. We have to vote based on policies, but not based on where the person comes from or where the person does for me personally. That one, I don't think it will help. So it's high time the youth of Africa stood up and then face their leaders. They have to demand accountability. We have to hold them to whatever they promise us, because really, the continent of Africa is in shambles, despite the resources that we have. So I agree perfectly with my brother Abraham. Yes, we all have to accept the fact that we are failing and that we need to wake up and then hold our leaders accountable for whatever they promise to do for the nation.
Thank you so much, Bismail. I truly appreciate it. So, guys, the very next topic or segment, which is equally interesting, that I would like us to share. There is such, or there have been such a complicated relationship between Zimbabwe and the West. And I wanted to get a sense of your opinion and your understanding as to why do you think, well, first and foremost, let me point out the fact that there have been, let me see here, about 6 United States presidents who were in office from the time that President Mugabe took power up until the time that he relinquished, or rather was toppled off the power. And throughout the whole entire time period, there have been so much that has gone in the country of Zimbabwe. Given that the country of Zimbabwe and the United States, the country of Zimbabwe and UK, the country of Zimbabwe and the other European countries, including African countries, there have been relationships. But in particular now, the relationships between Zimbabwe and the West. Here I'm referring to specifically the United States, for example, and the UK. It has grown to be sour. And our brother MUTAI alluded to the fact that the economy of Zimbabwe, to an extent, was also a result of sanctions, among so many other things. I'd like to start with you, Bismail. What are your thoughts as far as your understanding and your viewpoint when it comes to the complicated relationships that the United States had with Zimbabwe, but also the complicated relationships that Zimbabwe ended up having with UK?
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, it's quite unfortunate that Zimbabwe had such a very bitter relationship with the USA and then the UK. Yes, as we said, UK and then USA, let me say, are the two main partners of Africa in terms of trade and then industry. Yes, there could be a time where Zimbabwe could be the main exporter of a particular product to the United States, or United States could be the main buyer of products from Zimbabwe. So when United States placed an embargo on exports from Zimbabwe, definitely it's going to cripple their economy. It's really, really going to cripple their economy. And after I said early on, yes, Mugabe was such a strong.
It looks like the connection with Bismail is also going down. MUTAI, can you jump in if you can still hear me? Same question with you as well. The relationships between Zimbabwe and the West really grew too sour. What do you have to say? What are your opinions? Because you actually started mentioning that a part of the sour relationship or the complicated relationships resulted in the in the sanctions being imposed to the country of Zimbabwe. What are your thoughts? And do you think that these sanctions brought Zimbabwe as a country to the knees? And what also could be done to avoid things like that as a country? Because I don't think a country should be brought down to the knees by another country through aid or through all sorts of things. What are your views on that?
Thank you so much. My views on this situation is that our African leaders, they like making a lot of excuses for nothing, and us as Africans, we like excusing them actually for nothing. This is because as a leader, and I want to use Thomas Sankara as a leader. Actually, I want to use him as an example of this situation because if you look very keenly to the things that Thomas Sankara did in the period that he was in power, and actually was in power about 4 to almost 5 years, he did so much without the help of the West. For instance, he actually enabled women empowerment in that country. He contributed to environmental conservation. Thomas Sankara planted almost 10 million trees in a very short period of time. He actually empowered women. You can imagine in the period of between 1970s and 1980s, a president in Africa is empowering women. He even actually introduced women to the presidential guard. He himself, in Africa at the moment, actually, let me not say in Africa, let me say in Kenya at the moment, if you don't have the portrait of the president in your business premises, you'll be arrested. That is in Kenya in 2019. But in 1970s, 1980s, Thomas Sankara actually banned his own portrait from being portrayed on premises, on business premises. He said it's not a must for you to put the president's, portrait on business premises. Thomas Sankara refused to use an air conditioning in his own office on the grounds that air conditioning was a luxury. I mean, try to imagine in those years, back then, when the economies of Africa was not so big, when the technology was not so big as it is at the moment. Thomas Sankara managed to turn around his own country without the Western aid. That's what I'm trying to bring out at the moment. So I'm trying to say this. What I'm trying to say is actually that African leaders, without even, let's forget about the West. Let's forget about the West completely. Let's not even talk about the West. Friends, African leaders, it is about incompetence. In Kenya today, as we speak, actually today, our budget is almost, our national debt is almost twice our national budget as we speak. So today we are discussing on how our taxman, of course, an agency that is charged with collecting tax, can be able to collect enough money to gather for all the national debt that we have, pay it off, and then we'll be able to sustain our own economy with our own money by 2021. And we found a solution to that. And the solution to that is actually stamping out corruption, removing corruption from the system. So the point is this: let's not blame the West. The West, after colonizing us and we kicked them out, they came back in terms of aid. They have made us think that Africa cannot continue without their money. Who was giving them aid before they developed? Nobody. Who gave aid to UK? Nobody gave them aid. Who gave aid to the United States? Nobody gave America aid. They developed their nation. They managed their money, managed their taxes. They removed corruption until they were able to manage the economy without money from elsewhere. The national debt of America at the moment is all about infrastructure, development, and etc. It's not about funding salaries. You find that half of the money that is being borrowed in Africa is funding salaries in Africa. So when we talk about foreign aid, I want to say that Zimbabweans, they don't have an excuse. You Zimbabweans don't have an excuse. Never blame sanctions. Don't even go there. Because if you go to the sanctions, you are trying to excuse your laziness. That's the point. Sankara, in those years back then, proved to the rest of Africans, that you can manage an economy for 5 years. Sangara managed the economy for 5 years without any money from any country in the West. What about in 2019? I mean, come on. We have better systems of collecting tax. We can collect enough money. We can remove corruption from our own economy until we can manage our economy. We can fund our own economies without depending on England. Why would Zimbabweans say that our economy collapsed because England gave us, sanctions? Our economy collapsed because not Zimbabwe, because United States gave us sanctions. You have minerals in Zimbabwe. Sell your minerals to the countries that are willing. Take your minerals, the money you have stored, the money you got from the minerals, take it and develop your country, develop the infrastructure. That cannot happen because the people who are selling the minerals are corrupt. They sell the minerals and then they steal from the people of Zimbabwe. That is the problem. It is not about the aid from the West. We don't need money from the West. In Kenya, we don't need money from the West. The money that comes to Kenya, let me give you a very simple example. In 2004, there's a program in Kenya that is called Free Primary Education. The United Kingdom gave us money, about $100 million. All of that money, half of that money was stolen by people in power in Kenya. The minister and his own cronies, they stole the money. But still we are here. We are speaking, I'm in Kenya. The country is running. That one tells you something. It tells you that the economy of Kenya can run without the aid from the West. What we need in Africa is people who think about Africa. People want to manage the resources of Africa, not people who talk and talk and talk. We need Thomas Sankara in Africa. I'm not saying Thomas Sankara was perfect, but he proved one point. He proved that Africa can run without the aid from the West. And I'm a learning person. I've done finance. I have a master's and I'm doing my PhD at the moment. And I know I can tell you for sure, Africa can operate without aid from the West. Let's even talk about South Africa. South Africa is one of the greatest exporters of minerals. What do they need aid from the West for? Let's not talk about South Africa. Let's talk about the Democratic Republic of Congo. Democratic Republic of Congo, they have one of the largest depots. They have cobalt. The cobalt in Democratic Republic of Congo is the largest in the whole world as we speak. And the cobalt, do you know what it does? Actually, cobalt is used to manufacture phones. Without cobalt, we don't have phones. As we speak, no phones without cobalt. No, let's be honest. Why would DRC or the Democratic Republic of Congo need aid when they have cobalt that manufactures all the phones in the world? Why would they need aid? If you are not mediocrity, why do you need aid when you have the largest deposit of cobalt in the whole world? If you don't sell it, the world will come kneeling down to you saying, please sell it to us. Why? That is mediocrity. We don't need aid from the West. We don't need aid. Look at Tanzania. They have a lot of gold, but still they need aid. What for? So when we talk about aid, let me finalize because I have a lot of points, but let me just finalize Bikoro. Let's talk about Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast, they're one of the largest exporters of the cocoa plant and its products. They're one of the largest exporters in Africa, actually in the world, not in Africa, in the world. But do you know what? Belgium is the largest producer of the cocoa, of the chocolate, which is a product that comes from the cocoa. Now, let's ask ourselves, why would you export your minerals, your raw minerals, to Belgium and Europe instead of producing all of those chocolates in Ivory Coast? And then don't sell it to Europe. Sell it in Africa. Bring it to Kenya. Why will you take it to, why will you take it to England? Take it to South Africa. Take it to England. Take it here in Tanzania. Take it to Congo. Take it to Rwanda. Sell it in Africa. We have a 1 billion population. But you want to take your minerals in raw form to Europe. And for what? It is incompetence in our leadership. And that's what we need to call off in Africa. We need to tell them off. We need to tell them that we are tired in Africa. We want the leaders of South Africa, the leaders of West Africa, to create industries in West Africa, and they need to create superb industries. Because they say, if you process cocoa in West Africa, you can't sell it in Europe because it will be substandard. Then why don't you create serious, very serious industries in West Africa that can produce cocoa that is so quality that it can be sold in Europe? What is the problem? There's no problem. It is about leadership, management. So don't tell us, nobody should tell Africa, you need aid. The aid is about business. The people who are in power, they want to create more money, more wealth for themselves. Look at the African presidents. They are so wealthy, they don't even know where some of their wealth is. They don't know. And that is what we are suffering from. Look at Nabongo. Nabongo was sick. He went for surgery. Then instead of coming to his own country, he went to Morocco. And he stayed in Morocco for so long, recuperating. Why would you do that as an African president? Why would you do that? And then the people are just sitting there waiting for their president to come back. It is about leadership. Incompetence that we have in Africa. We don't need aid. We don't need American money. We don't need US aid. Go to Russia. There's no US aid in Russia. Go to China. There's no US aid in China. Go to Japan. No US aid in Japan. Go to India. No US aid in India. Why would it be in Africa? Why would someone make you think that for you to develop, you need money from the West? You don't need money from the West. You need management of the only money that you have. And Sangara, almost 40 years ago, when there was no technology, knowledge was not so much, he showed us that it can be done in Africa. So in 2019, why would you as Zimbabwean make it an excuse that your economy is doing so bad because you have sanctions from England? If you cannot trade with England, trade with Kenya. We have 50 million people in Kenya. Bring all your goods to Kenya, you will buy them. Take all your goods to Gabon, they will buy. Why will you take them to England and they have all these sanctions for you? It's a serious question. Africa needs to wake up. It is not a matter, it's not a laughing matter. It's not an issue that we need to laugh at. It's an issue we need to get angry at.
Thank you so much, Abraham. Going back to Cloud and BISMARK, guys, you were just hearing what our brother passionately shared with us. Claude, what do you have to say about that? What are your views on that?
I think we have finally gotten to a point, to a topic where I actually have a lot of disagreements with Abraham. I think we've agreed so far to this point. The role of the West cannot be discounted in Africa. And I am so glad that the example you used was Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara did so well